We thought this intention very noble in Steerforth, whose mother was a widow and rich, and would do almost anything, it was said, that he asked her. We were all extremely glad to see Traddles so put down, and exalted Steerforth to the skies, especially when he told us, as he condescended to do, that when he had done that what he had been done expressly for us and for our cause, and that he had conferred a great boon upon us by unselfishly doing it. But I must say that when I was going on with the story in the dark that night, Mr. Mell's old flute seemed more than once to sound mournfully in my ears, and that when at last Steerforth was tired, and I lay down in my bed, I fancied it playing so sorrowfully somewhere that I was quite wretched. I soon forgot him in the contemplation of Steerforth, who, in an easy amateur way, and without any book, he seemed to me to know everything by heart, took some of his classes until a new master was found. The new master came from a grammar school, and before he entered on his duties, dined in the parlour one day to be introduced to Steerforth. Steerforth approved of him highly, and told us he was a brick. Without exactly understanding what learned distinction was meant by this, I respected him greatly for it, and had no doubt whatever of his superior knowledge, though he never took the pains with me, not that I was anybody, that Mr. Mell had taken. There was only one other event in this half year out of the daily school life that made an impression upon me which still survives. It survives for many reasons. One afternoon, when we were all harassed into a state of dire confusion, and Mr. Creakle was laying about him dreadfully, Tungay came in and called out in his usual strong way, "Visitors for Copperfield." A few words were interchanged between him and Mr. Creakle as who the visitors were, and what room they were to be shown into, and then I, who had, according to custom, stood up on the announcement being made, and felt quite faint with astonishment, was told to go by the back stairs and get a clean frill on before I repaired to the dining room. These orders I obeyed, in such a flutter and hurry of my young spirits as I had never known before, and when I got to the parlour door, and the thought came into my head that it might be my mother, I had only thought of Mr. and Miss Murdstone until then. I drew back my hand from the lock, and stopped to have a sob before I went in. At first I saw nobody, but feeling a pressure against the door, I looked round it, and there, to my amazement, were Mr. Peggotty and Ham, ducking at me with their hats, and squeezing one another against the wall. I could not help laughing, but it was much more in the pleasure of seeing them than at the appearance they made. We shook hands in a very cordial way, and I laughed and laughed until I pulled out my pocket handkerchief and wiped my eyes. Mr. Peggotty, who never shut his mouth once, I remember, during the visit, showed great concern when he saw me do this, and nudged Ham to say something. "Cheer up, Master Davy Bore," said Ham, in his simpering way. "Why, how you've growed!" "Am I grown?" I said, drying my eyes. I was not crying at anything in particular that I know of, but somehow it made me cry, to see old friends. "Growed, Master Davy Bore? Ain't he growed?" said Ham. "Ain't he growed?" said Mr. Peggotty. They made me laugh again by laughing at each other, and then we all three laughed, and I was in danger of crying again. "Do you know how Mamma is, Mr. Peggotty?" I said, "and how my dear, dear old Peggotty is?" "Uncommon," said Mr. Peggotty. "And little Emily and Mrs. Gummidge?" "Uncommon," said Mr. Peggotty. There was a silence. Mr. Peggotty, to relieve it, took two prodigious lobsters and an enormous crab, and a large canvas bag of shrimps out of his pockets, and piled them up in Ham's arms. "You see," said Mr. Peggotty, "knowing as you was partial to a little relish with your wittles when you was along with us, we took the liberty. The old mother biled 'em, she did. Mrs. Gummidge biled 'em, yes," said Mr. Peggotty slowly, who, I thought, appeared to stick to the subject on account of having no other subject ready. "Mrs. Gummidge, I do assure you, she biled 'em." I expressed my thanks. Mr. Peggotty, after looking at Ham, who stood smiling sheepishly over the shellfish without making any attempt to help him, said, "We come, you see, the wind and tide making in our favour, in one of our Yarmouth lugs to Gravesend. My sister, she wrote to me the name of this here place, and wrote to me as if ever I had the chance to come to Gravesend. I was to come over and inquire for Master Davy and give her duty, humbly wishing him well, and reporting of the family as they were uncommon to be sure. Little Emily, you see, she'll write to my sister when I go back, as I see you, and as you was similarly uncommon, and so we make it quite a merry-go-rounder." I was obliged to consider a little before I understood what Mr. Peggotty meant by this figure, expressive of a complete circle of intelligence. I then thanked him heartily, and said, with a conscience of reddening, that I supposed little Emily was altered too, since we used to pick up shells and pebbles on the beach. "She's getting to be a woman, that's what she's getting to be," said Mr. Peggotty. "Ask him." He meant Ham, who beamed with delight and assent over the bag of shrimps. "Her pretty face," said Mr. Peggotty, with his own shining like a light. "Her learning," said Ham. "Her writing," said Mr. Peggotty. "Why, it's as black as jet, and so large it is, you might see it anywheres." It was perfectly delightful to behold with what enthusiasm Mr. Peggotty became inspired when he thought of his little favourite. He stands before me again, his bluff, hairy face irradiating with a joyful love and pride for which I can find no description. His honest eyes fire up and sparkle as if their depths were stirred by something bright. His broad chest heaves with pleasure. His strong, loose hands clench themselves in his earnestness, and he emphasizes what he says with a right arm that shows, in my pygmy view, like a sledgehammer. Ham was quite as earnest as he. I dare say they would have said much more about her if they had not been abashed by the unexpected coming in of Steerforth, who, seeing me in a corner speaking with two strangers, stopped in a song he was singing and said, "I didn't know you were here, young Copperfield," for it was not the usual visiting room, and crossed by us on his way out. I am not sure whether it was in the pride of having such a friend as Steerforth, or in the desire to explain to him how I came to have such a friend as Mr. Peggotty, that I called to him as he was going away, but I said, modestly, "Good heaven, how it all comes back to me this long time afterwards. Don't go, Steerforth, if you please. These are two Yarmouth boatmen, very kind, good people, who are relations of my nurse, and have come from Gravesend to see me." "Aye, aye," said Steerforth, returning. "I am glad to see them. How are you both?" There was an ease in his manner, a gay and light manner it was, but not swaggering, which I still believe to have borne a kind of enchantment with it. I still believe him, in virtue of this carriage, his animal spirits, his delightful voice, his handsome face and figure, and, for aught I know, of some inborn power of attraction besides, which I think a few people possess, to have carried a spell with him to which it was a natural weakness to yield, and which not many persons could withstand. I could not but see how pleased they were with him, and how they seemed to open their hearts to him in a moment. "You must let them know at home, if you please, Mr. Peggotty," I said, "when that letter is sent, that Mr. Steerforth is very kind to me, and that I don't know what I should ever do here without him." "Nonsense," said Steerforth, laughing. "You mustn't tell them anything of the kind. And if Mr. Steerforth ever comes into Norfolk or Suffolk, Mr. Peggotty," I said, "while I am there, you may depend upon it I shall bring him to Yarmouth, if he will let me, to see your house. You never saw such a good house, Steerforth. It's made out of a boat." "Made out of a boat, is it?" said Steerforth. "It's the right sort of a house for such a thorough-built boatman." "So 'tis, sir, so 'tis, sir," said Ham, grinning. "You're right, young gentleman. Master Davy bore gentleman's right. A thorough-built boatman. That's what he is, too." Mr. Peggotty was no less pleased than his nephew, though his modesty forbade him to claim a personal compliment so vociferously. "Well, sir," he said, bowing and chuckling, and tucking in the ends of his neckerchief at his breast. I thank ye, sir, I thank ye. I do my endeavours in my line of life, sir. The best of men can do no more, Mr. Peggotty, said Steerforth. He had got his name already. I'll pound it it's what you do yourself, sir, said Mr. Peggotty, shaking his head, and what you do well, right well. I thank ye, sir. I'm obliged to you, sir, for your welcoming manner of me. I'm rough, sir, but I'm ready. Leastways, I hope I'm ready. You understand. My house ain't much for to see, sir, but it's hearty at your service if you ever should come along with Master Davy to see it. I'm a regular dodman, I am, said Mr. Peggotty, by which he meant snail, and this was in allusion to his being slow to go, for he had attempted to go after every sentence and had somehow or other come back again. But I wish you both well, and I wish you happy. Ham echoed this sentiment, and we parted with them in the heartiest manner. I was almost tempted that evening to tell Steerforth about pretty little Emily, but I was too timid of mentioning her name, and too much afraid of his laughing at me. I remember that I thought a good deal, and in an uneasy sort of way, about Mr. Peggotty having said that she was getting on to be a woman, but I decided that was nonsense. We transported the shellfish, or the relish, as Mr. Peggotty had modestly called it, up into our room unobserved, and made a great supper that evening. But Traddles couldn't get happily out of it. He was too unfortunate even to come through a supper like anybody else. He was taken ill in the night, quite prostrate he was, in consequence of crab, and after being drugged with black draughts and blue pills to an extent which Demple, whose father was a doctor, said was enough to undermine a horse's constitution, received a caning and 6 chapters of Greek Testament for refusing to confess. The rest of the half year is a jumble in my recollection of the daily strife and struggle of our lives, of the waning summer and the changing seasons, of the frosty mornings when we were wrung out of bed, and the cold, cold smell of the dark nights when we were wrung into bed, of the evening schoolroom dimly lighted and indifferently warmed, and the morning schoolroom which was nothing but a great shivering machine, of the alternation of boiled beef with roast beef and boiled mutton with roast mutton, of clods of bread and butter, dog's-eared lesson books, cracked slates, tear-blotted copybooks, canings, rulerings, hair-cuttings, rainy Sundays, suet puddings, and a dirty atmosphere of ink surrounding all. I well remember, though, how the distant idea of the holidays, after seeming for an immense time to be a stationary speck, began to come towards us and to grow and grow. How from counting months we came to weeks, and then to days, and how I then began to be afraid that I should not be sent for, and when I learned from Steerforth that I had been sent for, and was certainly to go home, had dim forebodings that I might break my leg first. How the breaking up day changed its place fast and last, from the week after next to next week, this week, the day after tomorrow, tomorrow, today, tonight. When I was inside Yarmouth Mail and going home, I had many a broken sleep inside the Yarmouth Mail, and many an incoherent dream of all these things. But when I awoke at intervals, the ground outside the window was not the playground of Salem House, and the sound in my ears was not the sound of Mr. Creakle giving it to Traddles, but was the sound of the coachman touching up the horses. Chapter 8. My holidays, especially one happy afternoon. When we arrived before day at the inn where the mail stopped, which was not the inn where my friend the waiter lived, I was shown up to a nice little bedroom with "Dolphin" painted on the door. Very cold I was, I know, but notwithstanding the hot tea they had given me before a large fire downstairs, and very glad I was to turn into the Dolphin's bed, pull the Dolphin's blankets round my head, and go to sleep. Mr. Barkis, the carrier, was to call for me in the morning at 9 o'clock. I got up at 8, a little giddy from the shortness of my night's rest, and was ready for him before the appointed time. He received me exactly as if not 5 minutes had elapsed since we were last together, and I had only been into the hotel to get change for 6 pence, or something of that sort. As soon as I and my box were in the cart and the carrier was seated, the lazy horse walked away with us all at his accustomed pace. You look very well, Mr. Barkis, I said, thinking he would like to know it. Mr. Barkis rubbed his cheek with his cuff and then looked at his cuff as if he expected to find some of the bloom upon it, but made no other acknowledgment to the compliment. I gave you a message, Mr. Barkis, I said. I wrote to Beggedy. Ah, said Mr. Barkis. Mr. Barkis seemed gruff and answered dryly. Wasn't it right, Mr. Barkis? I asked after a little hesitation. Why, no, said Mr. Barkis. Not the message? The message was right enough, perhaps, said Mr. Barkis. But it come to an end there. Not understanding what he meant, I repeated inquisitively, Came to an end, Mr. Barkis? Nothing come of it, he explained, looking at me sideways. No answer. There was an answer expected, was there, Mr. Barkis? Said I, opening my eyes, for this was a new light to me. When a man says he's willing, said Mr. Barkis, turning his glance slowly on me again, it's as much as to say that man's a-waitin' for an answer. Well, Mr. Barkis? Well, said Mr. Barkis, carrying his eyes back to his horse's ears, that man's been a-waiting for an answer ever since. Have you told her so, Mr. Barkis? No, growled Mr. Barkis, reflecting about it. I ain't got no call to go and tell her so. I never said 6 words to her myself. I ain't a-going to tell her so. Would you like me to do it, Mr. Barkis? Said I doubtfully. You might tell her if you would, said Mr. Barkis, with another slow look at me that Barkis was awaiting for an answer. Says you, what name is it? Her name. Ah, said Mr. Barkis with a nod of his head. Peggotty. Christian name or natural name? Said Mr. Barkis. Oh, it's not her Christian name. Her Christian name is Clara. Is it, though? Said Mr. Barkis. He seemed to find an immense fund of reflection in this circumstance, and sat pondering and inwardly whistling for some time. Well, he resumed at length, says you, Peggotty, Barkis is waiting for an answer. Says she, perhaps, answer to what? Says you, to what I told you. What is that? Says she. Barkis is willing, says you. This extremely artful suggestion Mr. Barkis accompanied with a nudge of his elbow that gave me quite a stitch in my side. After that, he slouched over his horse in his usual manner, and made no other reference to the subject except half an hour afterwards taking a piece of chalk from his pocket and writing up, inside the tilt of the cart, Clara Peggotty, apparently as a private memorandum. Ah, what a strange feeling it was to be going home when it was not home, and to find that every object I looked at reminded me of the happy old home which was like a dream I could never dream again. The days when my mother and I and Peggotty were all in all to one another, and there was no one to come between us, rose up before me so sorrowfully on the road that I am not sure I was glad to be there, not sure but that I would rather have remained away and forgotten it in Steerforth's company. But there I was, and soon I was at our house, where the bare old elm trees wrung their many hands in the bleak wintry air, and shreds of the old rooks' nests drifted away upon the wind. The carrier put my box down at the garden gate, and left me. I walked along the path towards the house, glancing at the windows, and fearing at every step to see Mr. Murdstone or Miss Murdstone lowering out of one of them. No face appeared, however, and being come to the house, and knowing how to open the door before dark without knocking, I went in with a quiet, timid step. God knows how infantine the memory may have been that was awakened within me by the sound of my mother's voice in the old parlour when I set foot in the hall. She was singing in a low tone. I think I must have lain in her arms and heard her singing to me, so to me when I was but a baby. The strain was new to me, and yet I was so old that it filled my heart brimful like a friend come back from a long absence. I believed from the solitary and thoughtful way in which my mother murmured her song that she was alone, and I went softly into the room. She was sitting by the fire, suckling an infant, whose tiny hand she held against her neck. Her eyes were looking down upon his face, and she sat singing to it. It was so far right that she had no other companion. I spoke to her, and she started out and cried out. But seeing me, she called me her dear Davy, her own boy, and coming half across the room to meet me, kneeled down upon the ground and kissed me, and laid my head down on her bosom, near to the little creature that was nestling there, and put its hand to my lips. I wish I had died. I wish I had died then with that feeling in my heart. I should have been more fit for heaven than I ever have been since. He is your brother, said my mother, fondling me. Davy, my pretty boy, my poor child. Then she kissed me more and more, and clasped me round the neck. This was doing when Peggotty came running in, and bounced down on the ground beside us, and went mad about us both for a quarter of an hour. It seemed that I had not been expected so soon, the carrier being much before his usual time. It seemed, too, that Mr. and Miss Murdstone had gone out upon a visit in the neighbourhood, and would not return before night. I had never hoped for this. I had never thought it possible that we three could be together undisturbed once more, and I felt, for the time, as if the old days would come back. We dined together by the fireside. Peggotty was in attendance to wait upon us, but my mother wouldn't let her do it, and made her dine with us. I had my own old plate, with a brown view of a man of war in full sail upon it, which Peggotty had hoarded somewhere all the time I had been away, and would not have had broken, she said, for £100. I had my own old mug with David on it, and my own old little knife and fork that wouldn't cut. While we were at table, I thought it a favourable occasion to tell Peggotty about Mr. Barkis, who, before I had finished what I had to tell her, began to laugh and throw her apron over her face. Peggotty, said my mother, what's the matter? Peggotty only laughed the more, and held her apron tight over her face when my mother tried to pull it away, and sat as if her head were in a bag. What are you doing, you stupid creature? Said my mother, laughing. Oh, drat the man! Cried Peggotty. He wants to marry me. It would be a very good match for you, wouldn't it? Said my mother. Oh, I don't know, said Peggotty. Don't ask me. I wouldn't have him if he was made of gold, nor I wouldn't have anybody. Then why don't you tell him so, you ridiculous thing? Said my mother. Tell him so, retorted Peggotty, looking out of her apron. He has never said a word to me about it. He knows better. If he was to make so bold to say a word to me, I should slap his face. Her own was as red as ever I saw it, or any other face, I think. But she only covered it again for a few moments at a time, when she was taken with a violent fit of laughter, and after 2 or 3 of those attacks, went on with her dinner. I was remarked that my mother, though she smiled when Peggotty looked at her, became more serious and thoughtful. I had thoughtful. I had seen at first that she was changed. Her face was very pretty still, but it looked careworn and too delicate, and her hand was so thin and white that it seemed to me to be almost transparent. But the change to which I now refer was superadded to this. It was in her manner, which became anxious and fluttered. At last, she said, putting out her hand and laying it affectionately on the hand of her old servant. Peggotty, dear, you are not going to be married? Me, ma'am? Returned Peggotty, staring. Lord bless you, no. Not just yet, cried my mother tenderly. Never, cried Peggotty. My mother took her hand and said, Don't leave me, Peggotty. Stay with me. It will not be for long, perhaps. What should I ever do without you? Me leave you, my precious? Cried Peggotty. Not for all the world and his wife. Why, what's put that in your silly little head? for Peggotty had been used of old to talk to my mother sometimes like a child. But my mother made no answer except to thank her, and Peggotty went running on in her own fashion. Me leave you? I think I can see myself, Peggotty, go away from you. I should like to catch her at it. No, 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 said Peggotty, shaking her head and folding her arms. Not she, my dear. It isn't that there ain't some cats that would be well enough pleased if she did, but they shan't be pleased. They shall be aggravated. I'll stay with you till I'm a cross, cranky old woman, and when I am too deaf and too lame and too blind and too mumbly for want of teeth to be of any use at all, even to be found fault with, then I shall go to my Davy and ask him to take me in. And Peggotty, says I shall be glad to see you, and I'll make you as welcome as a queen. Bless your dear heart, cried Peggotty. I know you will. And she kissed me beforehand in grateful acknowledgment of my hospitality. After that, she covered her head with her apron again, and had another laugh about Mr. Barkis. After that, she took the baby out of its little cradle and nursed it. After that, she cleared the dinner table. After that, came in with another cap on, and her workbooks, and the yard measure, and the bit of wax candle, all just the same as ever. We sat round the fire and talked delightfully. I told them what a hard master Mr. Creakle was, and they pitied me very much. I told I told them what a fine fellow Steerforth was, and what a patron of mine, and Peggotty said she would walk a score of miles to see him. I took the little baby in my arms when it was awake, and nursed it lovingly. When it was asleep again, I crept close to my mother's side according to my old custom, broken now a long time, and sat with my arms embracing her waist, and my little red cheek on her shoulder, and once more felt her beautiful hair drooping over me like an angel's wing, as I used to think, I recollect, and was very happy indeed. While I sat thus, looking at the fire, and seeing pictures in the red-hot coals, I almost believed that I had never been away, that Mr. and Miss Murdstone were such pictures and would vanish when the fire got low, that there was nothing real in all that I remembered save my mother, Peggotty, and I. Peggotty darned away at her stocking as long as she could see, and then sat with it drawn on her left hand like a glove, and her needle in her right, ready to take another stitch whenever there was a blaze. I cannot conceive whose stockings they can have been that Peggotty was always darning, or where such an unfailing supply of stockings in want of darning can have come from. From my earliest infancy, she seems to have been always employed in that class of needlework, and never by any chance in any other. I wonder, said Peggotty, who sometimes seized with a fit of wandering on some most unexpected topic, what's become of Davy's great aunt? Lor, Peggotty, observed my mother, rousing herself from a reverie, what nonsense you talk. Well, but I really do wonder, ma'am, said Peggotty. What can have put such a person in your head? Inquired my mother. Is there nobody else in the world to come there? I don't know how it is, said Peggotty, unless it's on account of being stupid, but my head never can pick and choose as people. They come and they go, and they don't come and they don't go, just as they like. I wonder what's become of her. How absurd you are, Peggotty, returned my mother. One would suppose you wanted a second visit from her. Lord forbid, cried Peggotty. Well then, don't talk about such uncomfortable things, there's a good soul, said my mother. Miss Betsy is shut up in her cottage by the sea, no doubt, and will remain there. At all events, she is not likely ever to trouble us again. No, mused Peggotty. No, that ain't likely at all. I wonder if she was to die, whether she'd leave Davy anything. Good gracious me, Peggotty, returned my mother. What a nonsensical woman you are, when you know that she took offence at the poor dear boy's ever being born at all. I suppose she wouldn't be inclined to forgive him now, hinted Peggotty. Why should she be inclined to forgive him now? Said my mother rather sharply. Now that he's got a brother, I mean, said Peggotty. My mother immediately began to cry, and wondered how Peggotty dared to say such a thing. as if this poor little innocent in its cradle had ever done any harm to you or anybody else, you jealous thing, said she. You had much better go and marry Mr. Barkis the carrier, why don't you? I should make Miss Murdstone happy if I was to, said Peggotty. What a bad disposition you have, Peggotty, returned my mother. You are as jealous of Miss Murdstone as it is possible for a ridiculous creature to be. You want to keep the keys yourself and give out all the things, I suppose. I shouldn't be surprised if you did, when you know that she only does it out of kindness and the best intentions. You know she does, Peggotty. You know it well. Peggotty muttered something to the effect of bother the best intentions, and something else to the effect that there was a little too much of the best intentions going on. I know what you mean, you cross thing, said my mother. I understand you, Peggotty, perfectly. You know I do, and I wonder you don't colour up like fire. But one point at a time. Miss Murdstone is the point now, Peggotty, and you shan't escape from it. Haven't you heard her say over and over again that she thinks I am too thoughtless and too pretty? Suggested Peggotty. Well, returned my mother, half laughing, and if she is so silly as to say so, can I be blamed for it? No, I should hope not, indeed, returned my mother. Haven't you heard her say over and over again that on this account she wishes to spare me a great deal of trouble when she thinks I am not suited and which I really don't know myself that I am suited for? And isn't she up early and late and going to and fro continually? And doesn't she do all sorts of things and grope into all sorts of places, coal holes and pantries that I don't know where, and can't be very agreeable? And do you mean to insinuate that there is not a sort of devotion in that? I don't insinuate at all, said Peggotty. You do, Peggotty, returned my mother. You never do anything else except your work. You are always insinuating. You revel in it. And when you talk of Mr. Murdstone's good intentions, I never talk of them, said Peggotty. No, Peggotty, returned my mother, but you insinuated. That's what I told you just now. That's the worst of you. You will insinuate. I said, at the moment, that I understood you, and you see I did. When you talk of Mr. Murdstone's good intentions and pretend to slight them, for I don't believe you really do in your heart, Peggotty, you must be as well convinced as I am how good they are, and how they actuate him in everything. If he seems to have been at all stern with a certain person, Peggotty, you understand, and so I am sure does Davy, that I am not alluding to anybody present. It is solely because he is satisfied that it is for a certain person's benefit. He naturally loves a certain person on my account, and acts solely for a certain person's good. He is better able to judge of it than I am, for I very well know that I am a weak, light, girlish creature, and that he is a firm, grave, serious man, and he takes, said my mother, with the tears which were engendered in her affectionate nature stealing down her face, he takes great pains with me, and I ought to be very thankful to him and very submissive to him even in my thoughts, and when I am not, Peggotty, I worry and condemn myself and feel doubtful of my own heart and don't know what to do. Peggotty sat with her chin on the foot of her stocking, looking silently at the fire. There, Peggotty, said my mother, changing her tone, don't let us fall out with one another, for I couldn't bear it. You are my true friend, I know, if I have any in the world. When I call you a ridiculous creature, or a vexatious thing, or anything of that sort, Peggotty, I only mean that you are my true friend, and always have been, ever since the night when Mr. Copperfield first brought me home here, and you came out of the gate to meet me. Peggotty was not slow to respond and ratify the treaty of friendship by giving me one of her best hugs. I think I had some glimpses of the real character of this conversation at the time, but I am sure now that the good creature originated it and took her part in it, merely that my mother might comfort herself with the little contradictory summary in which she had indulged. The design was efficacious, for I remember that my mother seemed more at ease during the rest of the evening, and that Peggotty observed her less. When we had had our tea, and the ashes were thrown up and the candles snuffed, I read Peggotty a chapter out of the crocodile book in remembrance of old times. She took it out of her pocket. I don't know whether she had kept it there ever since,
And then we talked about Salem House, which brought me round again to Steerforth, who was my great subject. We were very happy, and that evening, as the last of its race, and destined evermore to close that volume of my life, will never pass out of my memory. It was almost 10 o'clock before we heard the sound of the wheels. We all got up then, and my mother said hurriedly that, as it was so late, and Mr. and Miss Murdstone approved of early hours for young people, perhaps I had better go to bed. I kissed her, and went upstairs with my candle directly before they came in. It appeared to my childish fancy, as I ascended to the bedroom where I had been imprisoned, that they brought a cold blast of air into the house, which blew away the old familiar feeling like a feather. I felt uncomfortable about going down to breakfast in the morning, as I had never set eyes on Mr. Murdstone since the day when I committed my memorable offence. However, as it must be done, I went down, after 2 or 3 false starts halfway, and many runs back on tiptoe to my own room, and presented myself in the parlour. He was standing before the fire with his back to it, while Miss Murdstone made the tea. He looked at me steadily as I entered, but made no sign of recognition whatever. I went up to him, after a moment of confusion, and said, "I beg your pardon, sir. I am very sorry for what I did. I am glad to hear you are very sorry, David," he replied. The hand he gave me was the hand I had bitten. I could not restrain my eye from resting for an instant on a red spot upon it, but it was not so red as I turned when I met that sinister expression on his face.